Coming at you from the ATL, from inside the paint and beyond the arc. This is Nothin But Nest, your Atlanta Hawks podcast. Now, here are your hosts, DeShaun Tate and Caleb Johnson.
Welcome into Nothin But Nest, episode 43. We come at a pivotal time for the Atlanta Hawks. It is win or go home. Yes, that is because, unfortunately, on Sunday night, the Atlanta Hawks do lose Game 4 in Atlanta, 129-121. Just a game that didn't have the same feel as Game 3. Something that you and I, DeShaun, had wondered about. You, of course, were gracious enough to come on my show, 92.9 The Game, the Dopey Millennial Show, and talk about what we had seen to Game 3, all of the positive things. Of course, I'm jumping right into things, DeShaun, and skipping the fact of, yes, I'm Caleb Johnson, and with my co-host, DeShaun Tate. I think it's just because maybe, DeShaun, there's an element in the back of my mind that's like, you know what, it's time to wrap this thing up. It's time to wrap the season up for the Atlanta Hawks, unfortunately, because it felt like Game 4 was the game that if this was going to be a true series, there was truly going to be some competition amongst the Atlanta Hawks and the Boston Celtics. It was going to happen in Game 4 to tie the series up. Instead, things are going in the way of up game 3-1. I was about to say 2-1, but up 3-1, headed into Game 5. What did you see out of Game 4 that kind of pushed you one way or another as to, especially coming off of Game 3 and all the excitement that everyone had, especially the fans, of, oh, we could really do this?
I feel like a somewhat of a lack of energy, a little bit, not just within players, maybe a little bit within coaching staff, but even within the crowd, I feel like a little bit.
Absolutely, within the crowd.
And I know when I came onto your show and we were having conversations about how the crowd did in Game 3, and I was like, I need a little bit more, because one thing that we knew is that Boston was going to come with more in 4 than they did in 3. Adjustments were going to be made and all of these other things. We talk about, getting ready and prepared for Game 5, and I don't think that there's many souls that are going to take Atlanta to win Game 5 in Boston. But, according to Trey in last night's post-game press conference, saying that, well, we got to go back home at some point anyway, so we might as well be to play a basketball game. In order to do that, in Game 6, you're gonna have to win in Game 5. We all get that and understand that, regardless of how unrealistic that may seem. But again, you're not just, as easy as it is to do this, you're not just whipping out your Sharpie pen and just insert here Boston Celtics and just giving it to them. Like, they got to go and play the game too. Like, I understand how difficult of a task that this is going to be for Atlanta and everything else, but they put their shorts on one leg at a time. Now, they might appear to clearly have the better roster that's putting their shorts on one leg at a time, that's for sure. But I'm going to tell you what I love, Caleb. This is where you separate the men from the boys. I called Game 3 a pride game. Mm-hmm. I think that Game 5 has got to be very much of that as well. At least I got to see Atlanta be competitive. I don't care about everything else. I got to see them be competitive. I know that there are some other asterisks that we will get into, but I love win or go home. You know my infatuation with March Madness. I love the win this game or take your ass home. I love it.
Well, and that was something that actually DeAndre Hunter said after last night's game. The quote that he gave us, I thought it was pretty cut and dry, and also just nice to hear a player kind of presented in this sort of way. DeAndre said, I mean, it's win or go home for us from here on out. So if we can't come to play now, I don't think we ever will. That's pretty direct. And DeAndre Hunter did his part in Game 4. This has been a series that has not looked particularly great for DeAndre Hunter, as I still have kind of wondered, the bone bruise that he dealt with at the end of the regular season, how much that was going to carry into things. I think he had been playing some pretty solid defense. It's just expecting him to guard, Jason Tatum on one end of the floor and then be a true offensive juggernaut on the other end of the floor. It's a lot to ask. However, in game 4, 27 points out of DeAndre Hunter. And I think his whole thing was, and this was something that Quinn Snyder spoke about that he's wanted to see out of his guy, is there was an aggressiveness to his play. I mean, there was just it was a moment he got a throw down dunk, and it was just he could have just simply laid it into the basket, and just gotten the easy 2 points. But there was something about, no, let's get this crowd into this thing. Let's get ourselves into this and truly try to make an impact in this game. I think there was just too many times where guys weren't showing up like they need to. They just weren't. Everything just wasn't clicking together. You talked about, kind of the pace to the start of the game. That was something that DeAndre spoke about when he was like, yeah, that intensity for us needs to be there at the start. Quinn Snyder was one to say it's got to be there for a full 48 minutes. We've got to match the Celtics' physicality and intensity for a full 48. We can't do it a little bit here, a little bit there, and expect to win. And that was something we saw it in game 3. We saw the Hawks get out with a big enough lead that even when Boston went on a run at times, the Hawks had an answer for it. And that was something that instead in game 4, you get out behind early and you're just playing catch up the rest of the game, just trying to make something happen. And that's how I think, Deshaun, you end up with a game where, we talked about Jason Tatum, Derek White, and Jaylen Brown, that trio, and how impactful they've been in this series. Okay, game 1, Jason Tatum, Derek White, Jaylen Brown combined for 78 points. Game 2, Jason Tatum, Derek White, and Jaylen Brown went for 73. Game 3, that trio had just 55 points, and it was like, okay, all right, they finally figured out a way of stopping them. Game 4, Jason Tatum, Derek White, Jaylen Brown combined for 80 points, 8-0. And that just felt like that was truly not the only difference, but that was just a huge difference in this one, as the Hawks shot well from 3 again, but so did the Celtics. And so you never got those breaks that you were getting in game 3 that helped you pull in and try to close the gap in this. I know the Hawks, they shrunk the lead to 4 at the start of the fourth quarter, but that was it. That was as close as you got. And it felt like they were never truly in this one. They were just trying to play catch up the whole time.
And they were. And I feel like some of the body language kind of, and again, I could be completely wrong about this. It just felt like the body language, or just if you could read a person's mind, it's almost kind of based off of the play. It kind of felt like we know these guys are better than us. If we somehow get lucky enough, or they just happen to have a really bad night and we happen to have a really good night, then we can find a way. But outside of that, considering what it's going to have to take, and that would be for 2 games in a row, by the way. And that just appeared very unrealistic. And I think some of it showed in the language. If you talk about some of the points that some of these guys have scored, and of course I'd be remiss if I didn't mention how Marcus Smart looked pretty good in Atlanta too, by the way. I mean, his trip in Atlanta has looked really good, and just hitting threes and doing all the little things that everybody needs on a team that's successful. I mean, listen, they got unfinished business. They're the ones representing the Eastern Conference on last year, and clearly the front runners to represent the Eastern Conference, I feel like, or not, maybe not clearly, but significantly, when you start factoring in the injury status of Giannis Antetokounmpo, and even Joel Embiid for that.
Exactly,
so
yeah.
I think it's pretty freaking clear. But when you have games where other guys on the roster can make an impact and just didn't, and you still couldn't find a way to will your way to a game. I mean, listen, I know you didn't play a ton of minutes, but for that exact reason, you didn't have a Grant Williams out there who's kind of a diet enforcer, a junior enforcer of like a Draymond-ish type to a degree. And then, you didn't have one of the more better veterans in this league who was also a former Hawk, and Al Horford. Both of those guys combined for 0 points. These are things that the Atlanta Hawks have to find a way to capitalize on. They clearly didn't do that. And I think that, in my opinion, we could talk about other things, bench and other stuff, because I definitely want to go down that road later on in the pod. But when you start talking about players like Marcus Smart, I've said this time and time again, you got a lot of nice guys. That's by far not, an insult. You got a lot of nice guys on this roster. You don't have the Draymond Greens, the Marcus Smarts, the Dylan Brooks, and a lot of times I feel like that's something that this team needs, because not even just about, what can this guy give you on offense? But what can this guy give me on defense? What can this guy do from a standpoint of keeping confidence for the other players around him when they're not playing well? Who's going to be the guy to get in their face and yank them up by the uniform and pull them face to face and be like, dude, get it together. You're better than this. We know that you're better than this. I practice with you every single day. Go out there and get it together, man, and stop bullcrapping with these guys. You know what I mean? Like, and really getting guys to be able to regain. Sometimes I feel like when you don't have that, everybody's kind of without, indirectly looking for who that person is. Not having that on your roster, I think, is partially one of the reasons behind why we see the Atlanta Hawks down 3-1 against a very, very good Boston team.
Yeah, I think the other element of Marcus Smart too, which is it's one of those things that you hate him when he's on the other team, but you love him when he's on your team, is he is just he's a gnat. He's a mosquito. He's just an annoyance out on the court. He's flopping, quite honestly. Like, let's be real about it. He's flopping on foul calls. He's, getting frustrated about other stuff. He's getting the other team frustrated about stuff. I should say, like, he kind of puts on a bit of an act, and he's all about, I want to get you so annoyed at me that you do something dumb that then costs you, whether it's a technical foul or whether it's you get stripped because you're focused on me doing something else, or whether you jack up a shot that you shouldn't jack up because you want to prove something to me or whatever. He is doing that kind of stuff. It's effective. It's really effective.
It is. He'll frustrate you. He'll make you speed up your tempo to play a lot faster. A lot of times those things can, turn into unforced errors amongst other things. And so, I always believe that players like that tend to be ones that I tend to like and love the most. Just because, they can affect the game in so many different ways if they're not scoring or if they're not doing some of these other little things and just being overly physical, or sometimes from time to time they don't mind getting the tech for bumping you or doing something that's just like making everybody say, I hate this guy. You know what I mean? But those little things are the things that make you think twice. It's almost kind of reminds me of, to a degree, the 80s, the 90s basketball, where you couldn't go up in there to the basket against those trees because they were going to lay you out, They weren't even going for the ball. It was to make a statement so that if nothing else, the next time you run through here, you're going to think about how we knocked you on your backside. And a lot of that is just mentality. And that's what I've been calling for, Caleb. I keep talking.
Yeah.
We got to do a better job, Caleb. We got to get a guy on the phone, okay? We got to get a guy on the line. Where's Ivan Johnson when you need him? I know I keep bringing him up. I keep talking about him. I know you love his last name and all that kind of stuff. We need the Ivan Johnson mentality guy. We need the guy that's just going to want to go out there. I'm not saying play dirty, but bring different leadership qualities that maybe some of the other guys don't necessarily have.
Yeah, you talk about a guy for the Celtics who's showing up and doing some really impressive things and playing in his role to the best of his ability. Now I want to go flip side of this. And DeShaun, we've got to talk about John Collins. I mean, it's been bad. Like not just kind of not great. I don't really know.
Can I put it in perspective, Caleb?
Sure.
Can I put it in perspective to the people? Handy dandy. Okay.
Yep.
John Collins, of the 4 games that have been played, scored in double digits one time. Okay.
Okay.
Collectively, of all 4 of those games, has scored 30 points. Okay. Furthermore, who's averaging 50% from the field on the season. In these 4 games, 32% from the field. More perspective. I'm glad you asked, Caleb. 21% from 3.
Yeah.
Not that he's an amazing 3-point shooter this year or anything like that. Nobody on the team is worthy of saying that, except for the guy that I keep saying, never gets a chance to get in the game, the rookie. Go ahead. You were about to say something?
Well, it was just I think John Collins is about a 36% 3-point shooter normally. Like,
Yes.
and I don't think he's been that this year per se,
Correct.
but just on an average year, I think over his career, he's about the 36 point percent 3-point 36% 3-point shooter. And yeah, I mean, you 21, like that's it's terrible.
And yeah, I would tell you what that looks like, but I don't think everybody wants to see what I had for lunch today. So here's the thing. Granted, 30, what do you say, 36%, 36%, 33, whatever it is, may not be mind-boggling or mind-blowing numbers per se from 3, especially in this league of which the 4 position does shoot fairly well, but it's still the 4 position. But 21%, we can't make excuses for that when you have an absolute wizard controlling the basketball and can usually always find you wide open for you to be able to knock down that jump shot. But I'm not done yet. 5 rebounds per game, 7.5 points per game in this particular series is what he's averaging. He averages double of that on the season, pretty much just about damn near at 13. Okay, more perspective. Like it's hard to defend the John Collins lovers, and I try to be a guy that I can always play devil's advocate, and I like John. I like John as a person, but
Same.
who cares? But who cares? Because I need John Collins to be a part of winning basketball games, and I will never be the person. You're not going to call me hypocritical, Caleb, because I've always been the person that feels my own way about people automatically pointing the finger at number 11. So I'm not going to say everything falls on John Collins, but there has to be more brought to the table, and I don't think that's surprising. Guess what all of this does, Caleb? It just sets us up for more off-season conversation about John Collins not being in a Hawks uniform.
Yeah, I think, I mean, he's really, I asked you on the show that we did on Saturday, like, has this series kind of been the nail in the coffin? I mean, following it up with game 4, it's like when you're in a position where Quinn Snyder was at a loss of what to do. He threw John Collins in there. John Collins couldn't get any offense going, but he was doing pretty decent defensively. He threw Sadiq in there. Sadiq was okay on offense, but wasn't giving you anything on defense. So you throw Jalen Johnson in there. I thought Jalen Johnson had some really good minutes and then never saw the floor again. But I at the same time, I think you're trying to, because you weren't getting incredible defense from Jalen. I think he was getting bullied a bit too. And so then you go back to John because you're like, all right, well, I need some defense. So let me throw him in there. And he was playing pretty decent on that end of the floor. It's just the offense that's been so bad. And his whole thing is in years past where he was, you weren't necessarily creating for John Collins, but he was just around in opportunities to score. He's now in the way. He's in the way in the paint. You need to clear up the spacing that Quinn Snyder talks about. They need more spacing. And when you've got John Collins and Clint Capella standing around the basket, just kind of being in the way, that gives less opportunity for Trae Young to get there and get floaters. So you need John Collins out on the perimeter shooting threes. Now he's not hitting them. And it's just like, I mean, the biggest problem, you talk about offseason conversation, the conversation's going to be what team is truly going to be interested in taking him, or are the Atlanta Hawks going to have to just eat a lot of this contract, unfortunately, and cut ties after this? Because you talk about liking him as a person. There is not a better person on the Atlanta Hawks than John Collins. I mean, he's a kind person. He's generous with his time, friendly, just great. But that don't matter when it comes to what you need from him out on the floor. You're not getting what you need from him out on the floor, and it's he's been a liability. And it makes me wonder. I know it's the postseason. It's the final game, or potentially could be the final game. Excuse me. Let me not get ahead of myself. And so I don't know if you go and bench him for Sadiq in a moment like this, or if you just kind of run it back with who we got, and let's go out with some form of pride or something like that. I honestly I don't know how this game is going to be approached. I do want to get into something, DeShaun, that is very important when it comes to Game 5. Dejounte Murray is suspended. That is now official. He has officially been suspended for Game 5. If you did not see what happened, there was, and I was coming into post-game press conference, and I heard someone say, "Ooh, man, like Dejounte had to be pulled away from yelling at someone," and I was like, I thought Marcus Smart. I was like, oh man, did Marcus, keep chirping after the game? And those two guys got into it. Well, then a video started resurfacing where Dejounte was shown. He walked into one of the officials. Not Zach Zarba was the lead official, but there was one of the other officials. Honestly, he's got a name that I can't pronounce. But he, as Dejounte Murray was leaving the floor, walked up to the official and just threw his shoulder into him and was yelling at him and walked away. It's one of those things. I know there was a lot of Hawks fans who, once the video started resurfacing, they were going, well, what about? No, I'm sorry. There's just there's nothing to justify it. You can't do that. You can't hit an official. And now you're dealing with a situation where when you need one of your guys the most, he's not there. I don't know what to say about it, DeShaun, because it's coming from a guy that I expect to be more mature and who has a little bit of history of getting ejected for hitting an official. He threw a ball at an official last year playing for the Spurs and was ejected. But just not something in this kind of moment that I would expect to see.
Yeah, unfortunate set of circumstances that we even have to be having this conversation, and we can't make it comparable to Brooks or Embiid. We're trying to kick somebody or Draymond stomping. We're not. We're going to hear a lot of those comparisons. So let's just get that part out of the way right now because I don't think it's comparable. But me personally, Caleb, I don't know. I guess I just think that the interesting and funny part is had Trae done that, oh yeah, everybody's talking about ship them off, but totally different conversation. But you expect more out of Dejounte, especially the way that not only deals with the media. Nobody's saying he's perfect nor has to be perfect. Nobody's expectations are of that. But ever since he has become a Hawk, I have just been enamored with his ability to just be mature in many of the most situations that would get anybody riled up. And I'm sure that it didn't help losing the game and being down and when you really won back and everything else. And that's not to make an excuse by any stretch of the imagination. However, I just think that we are also looking at a player really frustrated. Should it be a suspension? I mean, obviously, you got different. It's in the rule book now at this point. There's rules, regulations, protocols. Go ahead.
Grant Williams was suspended for it earlier this year. He bumped into an official earlier in the year, and he was suspended a game. It's just it's unfortunate because we were having this discussion amongst media after the game, and it was I was on the side of like that was a really dumb thing to do, but we'll
Yeah,
see if the league is maybe merciful and will just hand out a fine. But then I was reminded no, this is something that's in the rule book, and that
yeah,
if the league lets it slide this time, then somebody else will do something. It's
mhm,
just you got to be fair across the board. It's just unfortunate because, like you said, this is coming from a guy who we've seen handle himself very maturely.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and in some tough situations where you could absolutely expect him to lose his cool. I haven't seen him lose his cool like this since that Houston game at the beginning of the year where
Yes, yes.
he
The
tapped Jalen Green on the top
Jalen
of his
Green.
head. Yeah.
Hmm.
So that's the last time, and that was like the second or third week of the season. So
Yeah,
you don't expect to see this from him. It's unfortunate. It's gonna hurt the Hawks. This is just add this to the list of things that there's been some jokes about, 1, 2, 3 Cancun getting ready for game 5 on Tuesday. This doesn't
yeah,
help the fact that the the uphill battle the Atlanta Hawks are about to have to face in Boston on Tuesday.
yeah.
This just made it that much worse.
Yeah, this one could get ugly. And, again, we always talk about the lack of consistency when it comes to this team. I mean, what were we looking at in game 3 in terms of the bench contribution? I can't remember how many points it was,
22
but it was that
points.
in game 3.
Oh, excuse. So, game 3 they had yeah. So game 4 it was 21 points. Game 3 it was, I believe, 44.
Okay. Because you know what, last time I checked, we're probably talking about double the amount there at that point. But and not only that, but like shooting it really well. Talking about the bench contribution, and that's just something that they didn't get. How about this,
Yeah.
Caleb? Whether I call it 21 or you call it 22, at the end of the day, they were certainly under 23 points as a unit in this particular game. And it took 4 players to get to that number.
Yeah.
Mind you, Boston scores 27 in that game in terms of their bench. And they did it with 2 guys. And that's kind of the discouraging part because you have these pieces in Atlanta that can be good pieces. You have the greatest pieces. No, I don't think anybody's going to argue that. But when you start factoring in, the Jalen Johnson and Oyeko Kongwu and Bogi Bogdanovic, who guys that had great games, Sadiq Bey, guys who had great games in game 3 that they needed to replicate and duplicate those contributions on game 4, and they didn't do that.
Yeah.
None of them did, in fact. And so it's heartbreaking for the team and everything else. They still got another game to be played. I'm not sure how many people you're going to see picking Atlanta to win the game. Heck, some people just trying to figure out exactly how bad it's going to be. But, coming into this thing, I think the consensus would agree that the common denominator number here was 1, especially after the 30-point, lead that Boston had in game 1. Just simply fact that people know about Boston and how good that they are this year. But I really was hoping to see a little bit more bench contributions from some of these guys because it really in some ways in this series, Caleb, it has looked like Boston is just kind of taking their foot off the gas a little bit, going into cruise control, protecting the ball, and all these other things, running 4 corners probably for all we know.
Sure.
They've got a lot of ground to make up, and like we always say, one of my biggest concerns was how good will Atlanta be if they could implement some defensive pieces to their roster, and I think that we're seeing, if not nothing else, saw on Sunday night why that is the area that is so needed.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see on Tuesday if the Hawks give it a fighting chance at all, or if all of the circumstances are too much for them to overcome. Game 5 is on Tuesday. That's a 7:30 tip-off. Of course, you can listen to the game. Steve Holman will have the call on 929 The Game. I believe it is on TNT, if I remember that correctly, for the TV viewership. I'm not afraid to call it. I think it's going to be a gentleman's sweep. Atlanta got the nice win on Friday.
Sure.
But it feels like there's too much going against them. However, we've seen this team back against the wall in the past.
Yes,
Step up in some of the biggest moments. So I think it'll be interesting to see. Anything else you want to talk about, DeShaun, before we get out of here?
No, I don't think so, man. Just want to remind the people, go and find. Everybody knows a Hawks fan. Everybody knows a person who loves basketball in general. And just please do your part. Go and tweet at us. Me and Caleb, you see the lower third graphic there at the bottom. And make sure that you go tell somebody to go tell someone else where you can find the best basketball content right here for the Atlanta Hawks, the official Atlanta Hawks podcast under the Odyssey umbrella, and come educate yourself a little bit.
All right. And with that, we'll talk to you guys after Game 5. We'll see if it's an end of the season type deal or if there's another game to be played. Because funny enough, DeShaun, there's actually a Janet Jackson concert at State Farm Arena on Thursday. So there's a conflict technically. Janet might have to cancel her concert or at least delay it if the Hawks win on Tuesday. It'll be something worth we're seeing. You want Janet or do you want Hawks?
Hey, look,
that's a tough one for you, I bet.
Well, you see me sitting here trying to weigh my options. I don't know if Bill's listening or not. That makes a huge decision on, or a huge part of me making my decision. But I'll just say this much: you can't go wrong with Janet Jackson. You got 10 sweaty guys running up and down the floor, or you got Janet Jackson. It sounds like a no-brainer to me.
Yeah, we'll have to see. With that, thanks for watching Nothing But Nest. Thanks for listening to our podcast. We'll be back after Game 5, and we'll see which direction this goes. For my co-host, DeShaun Tate, I'm Caleb Johnson. Thanks to listening to Nothing But Nest.